Fired from the farm, he wanders aimlessly until an incredible woman reveals a surprising new path. Jake Thompson trudged along the winding road of his small Nebraska town, each step feeling like a weight added to his already burdened shoulders. The fields, once brimming with pride and purpose, now appeared to mock him. "Fired," he muttered, the words soaked in disbelief. It echoed through his mind, replaying the moment his father had dismissed him, eyes filled with disappointment. The unbearable heat of the sun failed to warm his heart, and the cornfields that swayed gently in the breeze seemed taunted by their own vitality. The local diner buzzed with laughter, families gathered over steaming plates, yet all he felt was isolation. His father's words stung like cold, hard steel. "You've abandoned your duty for a foolish dream." Jake's heart raced with conflicting emotions, anger at the man who had raised him, fear of being lost forever in the shadows of failure. The thought of the family legacy unraveling sent shudders through him, as claustrophobic as the barn that once offered so much shelter and safety. As he passed the hardware store, familiar faces turned their backs, the whispers trailing him like the scent of hay. Just a farmer, they must have thought, unaware of the turmoil swirling in his mind. His rational upbringing screamed for him to return to the safety of the fields, to sow the land that had nurtured generations. But something deep down stirred, a longing barely acknowledged amid his father's strict guidelines. The art gallery had always felt alien, a place of fantasy rather than reality, yet something like a magnetic pull drew him in. He hesitated at the threshold, caught in the clash of his upbringing and the stirring desire for expression. Then, swayed by impulse, Jake stepped inside. There he found Lily, a canvas of color and chaos, hair wild, hands speckled with paint. Her laughter danced like sunlight shimmering on water. As their conversation unfolded, she saw something in him he couldn't recognize, potential buried beneath disappointment. "Have you ever thought about painting?" she asked, her eyes bright with encouragement. Fear gripped him. "No, that's not for me," he replied, the response leaving a bitter taste. Yet within him, a flicker of intrigue ignited. The thought danced teasingly at the edges of his mind. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." A few days later, paintbrush in hand, he found solace in the colors that splattered across the canvas in Lily's studio. With each stroke, he felt a fleeting sense of freedom. Warm hues whispered promises of a brighter future, a stark contrast to the heaviness lingering from his past. But guilt mixed with exhilaration, tainting the liberation he craved. As he envisioned submitting his work to an upcoming local exhibit, fear gripped him. He pictured his father's scornful face. A betrayal, a voice echoed in his mind. Anger and pain warred within him, a chaotic tempest fueling his fire. He was torn, teetering on the edge between the security of tradition and the raw yearning for self-discovery. That evening, over a stilted family dinner, he summoned the courage to mention it to his father. The room thickened with a silence that felt explosive. His father's face morphed into a mask of disbelief, disappointment broadcasting a chasm of unspoken words. Jake stood, conflicted, aching, on the precipice of defiance. Would he dare to fan the flames of his father's rage? Or would he surrender to the powerful bond of family expectations, letting the vibrant colors fade to gray? As Jake contemplated the impending art exhibit, his heart drumming dangerously fast, he glanced at his phone. An urgent message flashed. His father wanted to talk. Tension gripped him, heavy and visceral. Would this be the moment that shattered everything, or the first brushstroke toward a new beginning? He felt the stakes rising, the waiting echoing in the silence. Jake breathed deeply, his chest tightening as he stared at the message on his phone, an anchor pulling him back to a past he was desperate to escape. He swallowed hard, the bitterness of disappointment mingled with the sweetness of newfound freedom. It was a conflict cultivated over years, and now its harvest was upon him. He considered ignoring the message, letting it slip into the realm of unread notifications, but that temptation betrayed the man he aimed to become. For better or worse, he wanted to be honest about what stirred within him. Arriving at his parents' house, the familiar facade loomed over him like an unwelcome cloud, dark and foreboding. He knocked tentatively, each rap echoing his indecision. His father opened the door, eyes shadowed by surprise and suspicion. "Jake!" His father's tone was neither welcoming nor hostile. It was sterile, reserved for business rather than family. "We need to talk?" The unadorned kitchen, saturated with the aroma of overcooked meat, felt like a prison. Jake felt the walls closing in as he took his seat at the table, every piece of furniture a relic of expectations, a reminder of duty. His father settled heavily in the chair opposite him, a mountain of silence building before the inevitable eruption. "Your mother is worried about you," his father began, the edges of his voice serrated with concern. "You've not been yourself since everything happened." Every syllable echoed with blame, yet Jake felt an ember glow within him, a flicker of resolve. He was no longer merely a shadow of compliance. "Dad, I'm working on something," he said, the weight of his words pressing against the barriers of tradition. "I've started painting." His father's brows furrowed, the disbelief stark. "Painting? You think that's a way to make a living? To carry on the legacy?" Each word felt like a hammer driving nails into his resolve, but he wouldn't falter so easily. "I don't want to carry on the same legacy anymore. I want to build my own. I want to create." The silence stretched taut. Jake held his breath, preparing for the backlash he suspected was coming. Instead, his father's face softened, revealing a hint of vulnerability, an unexpected crack in his armored facade. "I don't understand why you'd want to waste your time on that," he said, frustration simmering beneath a veneer of parental concern. "The farm is your future, our family's future." In that moment, Jake recognized the very fears that shackled his father. They were the same fears he had fought against, but in reverse, a fear of what life could be like if they strayed from tradition. A distant memory bubbled to the surface, his father in colorful paint-splattered overalls, laughing as they transformed a simple barn into something creative and vivid. That man had been swallowed by the weight of responsibility. "Maybe we lost ourselves somewhere along the way," Jake said quietly, the conviction firming within him. "But I think it's time to discover what we really want." For the first time, he wielded his words like a brush, painting a vision of possibility instead of fear. The stirring fire within him sparked anew as he awaited his father's response, the air crackling with tension and uncertainty. "Do you truly believe that?" his father asked, the challenge laced with intrigue. This was the moment where Jake could step into a new reality or retreat back into safety. "Every canvas holds infinite possibility," Jake declared, a silent plea woven through his conviction. "I need to find mine, whether you support me or not." Silence enveloped the room again, thick with implications. Would his father's indifference extinguish Jake's flame, or spark a dialogue they had both desperately needed? As they sat on the edge of this revelation, the weight of what came next began to settle in. Each tick of the clock synced with Jake's racing heartbeat. The moment felt monumental, and for the first time, he understood that he was no longer just a prisoner bound to legacy, but an artist staring at a blank canvas, ready to create the life he would dare to live. What Jake didn't know was that this was merely the beginning of a battle, one that would unravel against the very fabric of his existence, as his father's next words would either fortify or challenge everything he believed about family and identity. Jake lingered in the oppressive silence, his heart thudding in endless anticipation of his father's response. The stillness felt charged, a taut string ready to snap in either direction. He watched as his father's expression shifted through a gallery of emotions, disbelief, frustration, and eventually something resembling acceptance. "It's just hard to wrap my mind around," his father finally admitted, the defensiveness dissolving like mist in the sun. "You've worked the farm your whole life. Now you want to throw that away for paint?" The dismissal stung, but Jake kept his composure. "It's not throwing it away, it's redefining what it means to me." Each word felt like a step away from the expectations he had lived under. The urge to convince his father surged within him, but he paused. This was about more than just convincing an audience. This was his life, his moment to take control of his narrative. You really think that because you paint, you'll find some deeper meaning, some fulfillment? His father's skepticism hung heavy in the air. Yes, Jake replied, a sudden fire igniting within him. Creating has always made me feel alive. The work we did together, remember that time we painted the barn? It was about more than just colors. It brought life to something mundane. His father remained silent, his eyes narrowing in contemplation. Jake leaned in, willing to engage all the courage he had mustered. Dad, I'm not in a place where I can continue what you and Mom built while hiding away what I want. I need to explore this passion before it swallows me. Is this about the accident? His father's voice trembled, the question clawing at the heart of the matter. No, it's about me. It's about what I want to do with my life moving forward. The weight of his own admission felt liberating, almost exhilarating. Jake recognized that he had been educated in duty, but was only now beginning to school himself in desire. For moments that stretched into eternity, neither of them spoke. The tension morphed into a fragile acceptance. Maybe there was space for both visions, the legacy his father clung to and the future Jake dared to imagine. Okay, his father finally conceded, the word hesitating on the edge of fear and hope. If you want to give this painting a shot, I can't stop you, but I can't pretend to understand it. Just know that the farm will always be here. You're welcome back any time. A surge of relief washed over Jake. His father's conditional support felt like a lifebuoy amidst the turbulent waves of change. What had begun as a confrontation transformed into an unexpected alliance. Yet, an unsettling echo reverberated in his mind. Would his father really accept Jake's new identity? Or was this just an uneasy truce? After a hasty farewell adorned in unspoken promises, Jake stumbled back into the world outside. He was aware that the next step requires more than conviction. It called for vulnerability. He needed to confront critiques not only from his father, but also from the realm he was entering. Restlessness enveloped him. The desire to paint surged like a tidal wave crashing over years of suffocation. Yet the world felt daunting and expansive. An intimidating lifeblood pulsing through the streets. Realization dawned on him. It was essential to find a community that would foster this rebirth, where he could reconnect with his creativity and channel his fears through art. Contemplating this new direction, he recalled an art show flyer he had seen at the cafe where he had often retreated. The gallery seemed a beacon, a place where artists gathered to share their truths. As he reached into his pocket, retrieving the crinkled paper, the thrill of potential coursed through his veins. This was the moment he would transform further. But just then, a figure emerged from the shadows, a woman, her presence striking, with a ginger mane that danced in the soft breeze. As she approached, a spark of curiosity and intrigue lit within him. "Is that what I think it is?" she asked, nodding to the flyer in his hand, her voice imbued with playful challenge. Jake's heart raced. Here stood not just an opportunity for artistic expression, but perhaps the beginning of a connection that might further guide him down this uncertain path. "What do you think it is?" he shot back, a smile breaking the otherwise anxious shell he had encased himself in. "An invitation to let your creativity run wild," she replied, confidence radiating from her. In that instant, the horizon of possibility widened. The canvas of his life was ready for new strokes, and he was more than prepared to wield the brush. But as he engaged in the unfolding conversation, an acute recognition surfaced. This burgeoning connection could very well change everything. Would she, too, become a vital part of his journey towards self-discovery? He leaned in, the depths of their exchange tinged with uncertainty, but charged with the potential for transformation. The moment was thick with anticipation, and Jake had only made the first strokes on this new canvas. What would emerge from this unexpected wellspring of inspiration? The question lingered. In navigating this new terrain, would he find the strength to face the demons lurking in the shadows of his past? The conversation flowed, weaving a tapestry of shared dreams and mutual apprehensions. Jake found himself captivated by the woman's vibrant energy, her zest for life sparking something deep within him. He realized they were both voyagers at the edge of their respective journeys. "What's your name?" he asked, genuinely intrigued. "Riley," she said, her eyes sparkling. "And you're Jake, right? The painter who just stepped away from the family farm?" Jake nodded, his cheeks flushing slightly. Word travels fast, I guess. There's something bold about pursuing painting. Most people stay tethered to what they know. I'm trying to break free, he confessed, the weight of his intention brushing against the surface of his pride. But I'm also terrified of failing. Failure? Riley tilted her head. What does that look like? To me it's just part of the canvas. Her perspective flipped a switch in his mind. I suppose it could be a lesson. He pondered her words, realizing that the very act of painting was a commitment to vulnerability. It meant exposing oneself to the risk of imperfection, a struggle he had faced in life many times before, but never so openly. Exactly, she exclaimed, animated by the conversation. Each stroke, each color blends together to create something unique. That's life. It's all about mixing shades and uncovering what works. Jake couldn't help but admire her confidence. Here was a woman who embraced uncertainty as a canvas unto itself, urging him to rethink his fears as potential masterpieces waiting to be created. Perhaps her boldness was the catalyst he needed to rediscover his drive and passion. Maybe I do need to approach painting like I'm taking risks, he mused aloud. Mine has felt so limited, so calculated. I'm still wrestling with the fear of stepping outside the lines. That's where the magic happens, Riley responded, her voice warm yet firm. You have to let go and let the colors fight for their place. As their exchange carried on, Jake felt a newfound lightness expanding within him. With each word, the vision of his future transformed, shifting from a shadowy silhouette into a clearer, brighter backdrop. The smell of oil paints and the feel of a brush in his hand danced at the edge of his thoughts, alive and beckoning. Are you going to the show tomorrow night? She asked. I know I will be, and I think you should showcase some of your work. His pulse quickened. You think I should? What if it's not good enough? Good enough is subjective, she replied, her tone unwavering. What matters is sharing your voice. Art is about connection, not perfection. The thought of failure receded further back into the corners of his mind, replaced by the thrill of potential connection. If art was a bridge, then her invitation was the path he needed to walk. I'll do it, he said suddenly, the words tumbling out before he could reconsider. A surge of adrenaline followed, intoxicating and liberating. I'll show my work. See, I knew you had it in you, Riley said, beaming. Jake felt an infectious excitement bubbling inside, which spurred a rush of creativity he hadn't accessed in ages. After the show, maybe we could grab coffee? Jake suggested, surprised at his own boldness. Sure, I'd love that, she agreed, and as she spoke, the warmth in her gaze enveloped him and whispered of possibilities. But beneath that newfound exhilaration lingered another feeling, an unease that thinned the edges of his confidence. What if he faltered before the crowd? What if his work emerged only to be met with silence? You're ready for this, Jake? Riley's voice broke through, confident as a mid-afternoon sun. Trust yourself. With a deep breath, he grappled with his nerves, acknowledging the journey ahead. The prospect loomed before him, an art show highlighting his contrasts, his colors clashing and harmonizing, just like his life. As they traded ideas and hopes, Jake felt a transformation beginning to take shape. He was no longer just a man emerging from the shadow of his father's legacy. He was an artist discovering his distinct voice, complemented by Riley's encouraging presence. And yet, while he felt empowered, the topic of his father weighed heavily on his mind. Would his father embrace this new part of who he was, or would he remain shackled to traditional expectations? The inquiry festered beneath the vibrant colors of newfound hope, a darker undertone to assess. As their conversation unfolded until twilight's onset, Jake's excitement was tempered by uncertainty about how his journey would weave into the fabric of his family's expectations. What had begun as a simple conversation had opened vast avenues of reflection. Now the question lingered. What would it take for him to fully own his identity as both a son and an artist? And as he thought of the upcoming show, anticipation melded with anxiety at the prospect of revealing his true self. If the moment of truth arrived, would he be ready to stand in the light? The hours before the show felt like an eternity. As Jake stood in front of his easel, the blank canvas taunted him, a reflection of the turmoil swirling in his thoughts. Each brushstroke demanded a decision, Each decision seemed to carry the weight of every expectation he'd felt all his life. The sun dipped low, illuminating the studio in golden hues, but all he saw was the shadow of uncertainty creeping back into his mind. He dipped the brush into vibrant crimson, but the paint didn't flow. It clumped and resisted his touch, mirroring his lack of confidence. The memories of his father's disapproving gaze lingered, wrapping around him like a restrictive shroud. The specter of traditional norms hovered like a storm cloud, questioning his choices and reinforcing the notion that art was an impractical pursuit. It was one thing to engage in conversation about bravery with Riley, but quite another to face the reality of revealing his heart's work to the world. What if no one cared? What if they laughed? Each doubt gnawed at his resolve, a relentless tide of self-loathing. His hands trembled, his mind racing back and forth. Would his father even recognize him as an artist? Or would he always be just a son of the farm, destined to toil under the watchful eye of family expectations? Breathe, he reminded himself. The air felt suffocating as he wiped the brush against the canvas again, this time guided by a fluttering hope. What if he painted his truth? The thought sent a pulse of energy through him. This was his moment to silence the doubt and express the vivid tapestry of his emotions, just as Riley had described. He closed his eyes for a second, visualizing the connection art could forge. The first stroke broke through the barrier of fear, bold and unapologetic, a swirl of emotions spilling onto the canvas. Memories of the farm, blended with visions of his vibrant dreams, invaded the surface. It felt liberating, almost like a confession. The anguish he'd felt when torn between paths was now a swirl of color. Minutes turned into hours as he painted into the evening, a frenzy of creativity ignited by his need to share his voice. The previously haunting shadows evaporated beneath layers of paint, revealing an intricate scene that coalesced into something uniquely his. He stepped back to evaluate his work, sweat dripping from his brow. Each element spoke of struggle and aspiration. Jake smiled, feeling an unfamiliar confidence swell inside him. Maybe Riley was right. Maybe this was the essence of what it meant to truly create, embracing imperfections and weaving stories together. With a determined heart, he turned his attention to the clock. The show was only an hour away, and yet another wave of anxiety threatened to drag him down. What if he was mistaken in believing he had anything worthwhile to offer? As if summoned by his insecurities, the imagined laughter of unseen critics echoed in his head. He took a moment to collect himself. A flash of Riley's words echoed, "Art is about connection, not perfection." He had accepted her challenge. Now there was no turning back. He began an inner dialogue, affirming his worth not only as an artist, but as an individual. This was more than a show. It was a declaration of who he chose to be, despite external pressures. Suddenly there was a knock at the door. Heart racing, he opened it to find Riley standing there, her eyes alight with curiosity. "Are you ready?" she asked, and the energy of her presence flickered through his doubts. "Almost," he replied with a nervous laugh, gesturing to the canvas that still bore a hint of last-minute touches. "Wow, Jake, this looks incredible." She stepped closer, her appreciation wrapping around him like a warm embrace. In that moment, he realized he didn't have to shoulder the weight alone. He wasn't merely fighting to prove himself. He was shaping an identity that included shared experiences and newfound connection. As they made their way to the venue, Jake plastered a smile on his face. But deep inside, he felt the tension between anticipation and fear. What awaited him at the show would test him in ways he couldn't yet foresee. Would the world receive him with open arms, or would the shadows of his past drag him back into obscurity? The questions curled in his mind like tendrils of smoke, and as they entered the bustling venue, the lights illuminating works by others, he felt the ground shift beneath his feet. Would his voice resonate here? In the thrumming heart of the art community, Jake realized he was on the verge of something transformative, a reckoning that would shape not just his art, but his very identity. How he presented himself that night could either solidify his path or send him spiraling back into silence. Was he ready to confront both the audience and himself? The moment of truth was upon him, and he could either embrace it or retreat. He stood at the brink of revelation. As Jake stepped into the venue, the vibrant hum of conversation enveloped him like a wave, pushing him to the forefront of an unfamiliar battlefield. Artists mingled, their voices a mixture of excitement and nervous energy, but he was paralyzed by a growing sense of isolation. He felt as if he were peering into a world that belonged to others, a world filled with confidence he wished he could embody. Riley, still at his side, adjusted the strap of her bag, oblivious to his internal chaos. "This is it, Jake. Just remember, it's not about impressing anyone. It's about sharing your truth." Her words sparked a flicker of resolve, yet the fire of anxiety threatened to extinguish it. He wanted to believe her, but self-doubt clawed at his heart. What if his truth fell flat? They moved deeper into the gallery, the ambiance thick with artistry and ambition. Frames lined the walls like sentinels guarding their stories, each piece a reflection of someone's journey. The stark contrast between their confidence and his apprehension became starker with each passing moment. As they paused before a particularly striking piece, Jake's heart raced. An artist beside him was explaining his work with a charisma that captivated a small gathering. Jake felt small, invisible amidst the vibrant display of talents. "Look at the way he connects with them," Riley whispered, her voice barely rising above the clamor. "That's what it's all about." Jake knew she was right, but uncertainty consumed him. In his mind, the whispers of self-doubt grew louder, painting images of disappointment in the audience's eyes. He had worked so hard, yet the knowledge of its impermanence gnawed at him. He began to sweat, his breath shallow as he thought about sharing his own piece. "Hey," Riley nudged him gently, her gaze firm yet encouraging. "You've got this. Just focus on what you want to say with your art. You're not here to seek validation, you're here to express yourself." Those words trembled through him, resonating as he felt a jolt of clarity. Was this not the moment he had longed for? To stand tall and bare his soul, despite the weight of his past? He wrestled with the opposing forces inside him, one that wanted to fold into the background, and another that yearned to rise and be seen. As he spotted his canvas leaning against the far wall, vibrant and raw, he took a deep breath. The colors shimmered under the gallery lights, each hue bearing witness to his internal battle. "I'm going to show them," he murmured, testing the resolve in his voice. "This is my moment." With shaking hands, he began to navigate toward it, but a voice cut through the crowd behind him. "Look at that! Art isn't just for fun. It's supposed to challenge us." A critic, not someone whose respect he had ever hoped to earn. He could hear the skepticism rippling through the crowd, ready to latch onto mistakes, vulnerabilities, the imperfections of raw honesty. Riley squeezed his shoulder and, in that moment, Jake felt a surge of courage. This was a test. He could either lean into the discomfort and reveal himself or retreat behind the safety of his apprehensions. He had already faced the canvases of his doubts. Now it was time to confront an audience that would see him, vulnerabilities and all. He moved closer to his canvas, heart pounding with each step. What if they didn't understand? What if his truth felt too foreign, too raw for their world? But he realized that the risks were outweighed by the potential for connection. His art was a reflection of all he had endured, all he had overcome. As he reached his canvas, voices around him faded into an indistinct hum. He focused on it, aware that this moment would forge the next chapter of his life. Could he own his identity as an artist, flawed yet beautiful? Jake leaned forward, ready to share the voice that had been held captive for so long. The crowd fell silent, eyes locking onto him, and in that charged silence, the weight of expectation bore down on him. He lifted a paintbrush poised to address not just the canvas, but the haunting shadows of his past. Would he find the strength to reveal himself completely, or would he falter before an audience eager to judge? This was not merely an exhibition. It was a reckoning, a leap into the unknown. Would he soar, or would he crash? With the brush hovering above the canvas, Jake felt time around him stretch, every heartbeat a reminder of the gravity of this moment. A profound silence enveloped him, and he could feel the weight of countless gazes, an unspoken demand for honesty and reflection. It was both liberating and terrifying. He inhaled sharply, grounding himself as he thought of Riley's encouragement. This was his opportunity, not just to present his art, but to unravel layers of himself that had long been concealed. The colors swirled in his mind like emotions caught in a maelstrom. Fear, excitement, doubt, and a flicker of hope. Each hue on the canvas beckoned him closer, whispering promises of self-discovery and validation. As the brush finally touched the surface, Jake's hand moved with a mixture of purpose and trembling uncertainty. He cultivated each stroke with intention, unearthing the essence of what it meant to be him. The fears of judgment began to dissipate, revealing a deeper revelation within him. This wasn't just about them. It was about him reclaiming his narrative. Fleeting glances swapped between the audience as they leaned in, uncertain but intrigued. He started with dark, brooding colors, reflecting the earlier days of his struggle, the period spent locked in a battle with anxiety, moments that had shaped him into who he was now. The brushstrokes grew more confident, and bright shades of orange and yellow emanated warmth into the scene. These represented not only his triumphs, but the beauty of vulnerability, the moments when he chose to rise despite the darkness. The crowd seemed entranced, but Jake caught a glimpse of skepticism creeping into the critic's expression. A flicker of self-doubt washed over him again. Was he simply trapping the weight of his experiences into something they could dismiss? That awareness crashed against the courage he had built, but now, even in the face of judgment, he couldn't shy away. No, he whispered to himself, gaining strength from the act of creation. This is my truth. He leaned into a vivid blue. It spread like a sky boundless in opportunity and creativity. Each stroke became a declaration, one that resonated not just with his past, but with the potential of who he could become. Everything intertwined, his fears, his dreams, the unresolved strains of relationships, and the latent desire for connection. Let it be, he murmured, letting go of the expectation. Each swipe of color told a story that was only his to tell. It was messy and chaotic, yet stunning all the same. With each stroke, he forged a bond between himself and those watching. The reaction began to shift from skepticism to intrigue. He could see it beneath their furrowed brows. Acceptance, curiosity, even admiration began to bloom. As he stepped back to survey his creation, something inside him cracked open. This was more than an exhibition. It was a metamorphosis. The applause that eventually erupted from the crowd felt like a tidal wave crashing over him. He had weathered the storm. He stood tall, no longer hiding under the veil of insecurity. And yet, amidst the roar of approval, a figure broke through. A woman, vibrant and captivating, with piercing eyes that locked onto his. There was an intensity in her gaze that sent a shiver down his spine. With the power of the moment lingering in the air, he felt an unmistakable connection, as if her vision resonated with his newly found resolve. "Jake," she called out, her voice cutting through the applause. "Can we talk?" The world faded away as he nodded, his heart racing again, but this time not from fear. Curiosity ignited within him, hinting at an unexpected pathway. What was it about her that felt so familiar yet foreign at once? Just as he moved toward her, a fragment of realization struck him. His journey had only just begun. Where would this conversation lead? What new challenges awaited him in this unfolding path marked by an intriguing stranger? Jake felt the ground shift beneath his feet as he approached the woman. There was a gravitational pull between them that sparked curiosity in his mind. Who was she? What did she see in him that elicited such an intense need for connection? As he stepped closer, her piercing gaze still anchored to his, he felt an unsettling mix of excitement and trepidation. "I'm Maya," she said, her voice smooth, yet powerful, weaving through the remnants of applause like a whisper of fate. "Jake," he replied, the word feeling inadequate in the wake of her presence. "Your painting, it was incredible, raw, honest. It moved me in ways I didn't expect." There was a sincerity in her tone that wrapped around his insecurities and held them at bay. The compliment struck a chord within him, a combination of validation and confusion. No one had ever articulated the complexity of his emotional landscape quite as she did. He opened his mouth to thank her but hesitated. What could he say that could match the sincerity in her eyes? Instead, silence expanded between them, filled with an unspoken understanding that neither of them dared to disrupt. "What brought you here?" he finally asked, the question bursting forth with an eagerness he couldn't quite suppress. Maya leaned back slightly, her expression shifting to one of contemplation. "I'm an artist too. I was here for different reasons. A personal journey, I suppose. And you? How long have you been painting?" Jake's mind raced, needing to project a confident image. I've always painted, but only recently have I started to embrace vulnerability in my work. The words felt bold as he spoke. They were a fragment of the person he was becoming. Embracing vulnerability is no easy task, she responded, her gaze unwavering. It takes a certain kind of courage. Her words hung between them, and Jake felt the weight of her insight. It was true. He had spent so many years trapped by fear and expectation, yet here he was, standing amidst the aftermath of his own metamorphosis. "Where do you find your courage?" he inquired. It was less about seeking advice and more about wanting to dive deeper into the essence of her spirit. Maya smiled, a hint of mischief dancing in her eyes. "I learned to turn my pain into art, just as you did. Each stroke tells a story, but it doesn't come easily. There are days I falter, and I question everything." That honesty reverberated within him, harmonizing against the self-doubt he still grappled with. "Do you ever worry about how that pain is perceived by others?" Jake asked, his curiosity pushing him forward. He had learned that each brushstroke held a mirror up to vulnerability, yet the risk of being misunderstood loomed large. "Of course," she said, unflinching. "But I've come to realize that the interpretation is theirs to navigate. We create for ourselves first." Her words ignited an urgent realization within Jake. She had articulated something crucial that he had yet to acknowledge fully. The need for acceptance had weighed down his art for far too long. Suddenly, he found his voice surging back, determined and focused. "If we create for ourselves first, what happens when that creation resonates with others?" A flicker of intrigue sparked in Maya's eyes. "That's where the magic lies, Jake. It's a connection, a bridge between hearts. Who knows where it might lead?" The possibilities unraveled before him like an unfolding canvas, painted with daring strokes of serendipity and uncharted exploration. At that moment, the world outside faded, and he felt a burgeoning sense of purpose, a flicker of ambition igniting. "What if I want to push beyond this exhibition? What if I want to create something bigger?" The question hung off his lips, trembling with both fear and hope. Maya stepped closer, her eyes brightening. "Then let's explore that together. What do you envision?" He took a deep breath, the weight of her inquiry settling over him like fresh paint glistening under a warm sun. His thoughts whirled, churning with ideas of abstract realms yet undiscovered, a sequel to his journey that had just begun. "Perhaps a collaborative piece," he said slowly, "something that marries our vulnerabilities." But even as he spoke, a nagging anxiety crept back in, clashing with the enthusiasm swirling around him. What if he failed? What if uncharted paths only led to dead ends? "Are you ready to step into the unknown?" Maya asked, her voice cutting through the fog of doubt. Jake's heart raced as he faced her, feeling the weight of her challenge. "Yes," he declared, though the word trembled with uncertainty. He understood that this decision could unfold into something life-altering. As the hope teased out ambition within him, a new question erupted from the depths of his psyche. Would he seize this moment, or would the shadows of insecurity darken his resolve? With Maya waiting, the stage was set for a leap into the frontier of creativity. And as he took the first step, a thought struck him. Sometimes, the most striking paths begin with the boldest questions. What would happen next? Jake felt a surge of adrenaline course through him as he stood in front of Maya, her gaze both grounding and electrifying. He understood he was at a pivotal moment in his life. This was not just about art, but about stepping into his own identity as an artist. The thrill was both exhilarating and terrifying. He had imagined countless scenarios of creative exploration, but had never envisioned a partnership in that journey. "What kind of collaborative piece do you envision?" Maya's voice danced between inspiration and challenge, prompting him to dig deeper. He pondered the question, feeling the weight of both expectation and desire. An idea began to take shape in his mind, a raw, unfiltered expression of their shared vulnerabilities. "A series, perhaps," he began, his voice steadying as confidence seeped in. "A dialogue between our experiences. Each piece could reflect a moment in our lives, a journey through pain to empowerment, both individually and together." Maya's eyes sparkled with interest. "A powerful concept. How do you see us intertwining those experiences?" The stakes were real now, but Jake felt exhilaration swell within him. They exchanged thoughts, a rich tapestry of ideas woven with each dialogue. He started to realize that expressing oneself in collaboration could amplify the messages they aimed to convey. Yet, with every spark of creativity, arose a question: what if their interpretations clashed? The nagging anxieties returned, crowding his mind. He had spent years nurturing his own artistic voice, and the thought of melding it with someone else's felt both risky and liberating. Battling through doubt, he pressed forward. What if we create separate pieces that reflect our journeys, and then find a way to merge them into one? Maya nodded like a sage, her fingers tapping lightly against her chin in contemplation. That will give us space to express ourselves while allowing our stories to intersect organically. It could create a deeper resonance. Her enthusiasm was contagious, yet a small voice inside him wondered if such depth could come without losing some part of himself in the process. Could he showcase his vulnerabilities without feeling exposed? Let's sketch out the ideas together so we can see how they might interact, she suggested, breaking through his internal fog. The thought of a visual brainstorming session ignited a flicker of excitement. They located a secluded area within the gallery, surrounded by remnants of other artists' creations, and set to work. As they sketched, Jake realized each stroke unleashed a wave of clarity. With Maya's lens, he began to see fragments of his own essence reflected back. The joy, the pain, the triumph, and the fragility. He felt liberated, yet the fear of inadequacy lingered. Can vulnerability truly be the foundation of our collaboration? He asked aloud, surprising himself with the vulnerability of the question. Maya paused, tilting her head thoughtfully. Only if you embrace it. We can share our stories, or we can hold back, but I believe the strength lies in the former. Her conviction resonated with Jake, yet uncertainty tightened in his chest. Behind the romantic notion of building art collaboratively lay the fear of exposing their innermost selves. The shadows of self-doubt lurked, but ambition began igniting. What did they truly have to gain by holding back? The pieces they created without fear could emerge as a powerful statement. In that moment, Jake made a choice. He would lay himself bare. Let's do it. Let's embrace the rawness of our experiences, no matter how uncomfortable it may feel. Smiling, Maya grabbed the brush from his hand. Then let's create art that speaks volumes. It's time to show the world who we truly are. As they turned to the blank canvas, an uneasy excitement bubbled within him. This could either be the beginning of the artistic breakthrough he craved, or a daunting plunge into vulnerability that might expose weaknesses he had carefully hidden. As they set to work, the exhilarating thought coursed through his veins. The moment had arrived for him to confront not only his external influences, but also the tangled complexity of his own psyche. The notion of identity and authenticity stood before him like an open door, challenging him to step through. Would he emerge stronger on the other side, with the confidence to claim his artistic space? An unfamiliar excitement urged Jake forward, eager to explore uncharted territory. But as he dipped the brush into paint, another question loomed. What happens when the vulnerability required to create becomes the catalyst for transformation? Under the vibrant light of a new dawn, Jake stood in front of the expansive canvas he shared with Maya, each stroke of paint symbolizing their intertwined journeys. The initial chaos of colors began to resonate deeply with him, reflecting the tumult of emotions he had traversed. The once stark lines between artist and legacy blurred. In this creative space, he felt liberated. With every hue they applied, it felt like shedding layers, mourning the expectations of his father while celebrating newfound freedom. Jake's confidence grew as he shared parts of himself he had long concealed. I never thought I could connect with someone so fully in this way, he admitted, the words tumbling out as easily as paint from the brush. Maya glanced at him, a wave of understanding crossing her features. Art has a way of revealing our truth, doesn't it? In that moment, Jake felt an overwhelming surge of recognition. He had spent years wrestling with his identity, battling the pull of familial duty against the fever of artistic aspiration. Yet here, amid swirling colors and shared vulnerabilities, he was forging a new understanding of himself. It was more than just creating art. It was about opening the door to his soul and letting in the fresh air of authenticity. Days of collaboration flew by, each session revealing more than just colors but emotions locked away for far too long. As they stepped back to evaluate their work, the fluidity of their partnership was evident. Jake could finally see his father's expectations in the rearview mirror. This artistic process provided him with a fresh perspective. The fleeting vibrations of doubt began dissipating like mist under the sun. As they prepared for their first public unveiling, excitement surged within him. Standing before the finished piece, a magnificent blend of their energies and experiences, Jake recognized he had conquered a significant personal milestone. He had allowed himself to be vulnerable, risking exposure and judgment. Yet he emerged not only intact, but stronger. "Maya, this is incredible!" The art radiated their journeys, a colorful narrative of resilience and dreams intertwined. They had created a dialogue, one that transcended their individual struggles, now inviting others to witness the beauty found in vulnerability. The night of the unveiling arrived. As onlookers circled their creation, Jake felt a swell of anticipation mingled with fear. Each lingering gaze sent his heart racing, but instead of retreating, he leaned in. "Thank you all for being here," he called out, his voice steady. "This piece represents a journey through self-discovery and the beauty of embracing vulnerability. We hope it resonates with you in your own lives." Amid the applause, he felt a familiar presence. It was his father. Jake's heart constricted momentarily. Would this be a moment of scorn or acceptance? His father's weathered face transformed, a reluctant hint of pride glimmering in his eyes. It became evident that the legacy Jake had feared losing was never meant to be a burden, but rather a foundation upon which he could build his own story. And in that moment, Jake swept his gaze through the crowd, landing back on Maya. Her encouraging smile burned brightly, reflecting a profound shift within himself. The fears had not vanished entirely, but now they were tempered by recognition and emotional strength. He had accomplished more than an artistic endeavor. He had forged a new identity. Later that evening, in the quiet aftermath of applause and laughter, Maya turned to him. "You did it, Jake. You found your voice." "I couldn't have done it without you," he replied sincerely, a connection palpable between them. Jake had stepped into the arena of vulnerability, and in doing so, he had not only expressed himself creatively, but had also started to redefine the narrative of who he was. He had accomplished his first major art show, embraced the complexities of identity, and discovered that he could navigate the challenges of expectation with resilience. As the night wound down, Jake felt a sense of closure and a profound sense of accomplishment. He might not yet be the man his father envisioned, but he was becoming the artist he had always yearned to be. Perhaps legacy and aspiration could exist hand in hand without undermining one another. Walking into the future, hand in hand with Maya, they harbored the hope of continued collaboration and an unwavering commitment to the expressions of their art, together as artists and individually as souls emerging into the light. Immediately, you need to subscribe now to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. These moments of triumph deserve it. Comment below your reactions and theories about the ending. We want to know how this journey resonates with you. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support is crucial and shows that you truly appreciate the power of personal growth stories.